What happens when a friendly late-night interview turns into one of the most uncomfortable moments in television history? Tonight, we're breaking down the shocking exchange between Jimmy Fallon and Mikey Day that left the audience silent, the crew scrambling, and ended with security escorting one of comedy's biggest names off the stage. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really caused this explosive confrontation. Now, let's get into what actually went down. The Tonight Show stage was set like any other evening. The band finished their introduction. The audience applause filled Studio 6B. And Jimmy Fallon bounced out with his signature energy, flashing that famous smile to the cameras. It was supposed to be a routine interview, the kind where two comedy veterans swap stories and make the audience laugh. Mikey Day was there to promote his latest projects. Fresh off another successful season. Everything seemed perfectly normal as Mikey walked out, waving to the crowd, taking his seat across from Jimmy at that iconic desk. Jimmy started with his usual warmth, leaning forward with genuine enthusiasm. Mikey Day, everybody. Man, it's so good to have you here. I feel like we don't get to hang out enough. We see each other at events, but never really get to just sit and talk. Mikey smiled, settling into the chair. Yeah, Jimmy. It's been a while. Thanks for having me on. Of course. Of course. So listen, I got to ask you about the new season. You've been killing it. That sketch you did last month, the one with the restaurant. I was dying. My wife and I were watching and we just kept rewinding it. How do you guys come up with this stuff? Mikey shifted slightly, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Well, it's a team effort. A lot of talented writers in that room. Jimmy nodded enthusiastically, not picking up on the subtle tension. But you've been writing a lot of your own stuff too, right? I heard you're one of the main voices in there now. That's got to feel amazing. It's part of the job, Mikey said, his tone measured. But yeah, I'm involved in the writing process. Jimmy laughed, that high-pitched giggle he's known for. Man, I remember when I was doing that show. Best years of my life. Honestly, the energy, the live audience, the risk of it all. Nothing compares to that feeling. When you nail a sketch and you can feel the audience just losing it. There was a pause, just a beat too long. Mikey's expression flickered with something the cameras caught, but Jimmy seemed to miss. Yeah, well, it's different for everyone, I guess. Oh, totally, Jimmy continued, slapping the desk. But that's what I loved about it. Every week was like this could be legendary or this could crash and burn, and you just had to commit. I remember this one time we had this sketch that was just not working in rehearsal, and I told the guys, I said we got to just go for it. And we did, and it became one of the most talked about moments that season. Mikey leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Right. That's great, Jimmy. The audience laughed a little, sensing something was off, but not sure what. Jimmy, riding the energy, kept going. So what about you? What's been your favorite sketch this season? Give the people some inside info. I don't know if I have a favorite, Mikey said flatly. They're all part of the show. Jimmy's smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. Come on, there's got to be one that stands out. The submarine sketch. That was hilarious. Or wait, the one where you played the lawyer with the weird accent. Jimmy, Mikey said, his voice taking on an edge. Can I ask you something? Yeah, of course. That's what we're here for, right? Jimmy spread his hands, encouraging. Do you actually watch the show, or do your producers just give you note cards? The audience went quiet. You could hear someone cough in the back row. Jimmy's smile froze on his face, his eyes widening slightly. What? No, of course I watch. I literally just told you about the restaurant sketch. You said you watched one sketch a month ago, Mikey said, his voice calm but pointed. And you got half the details wrong. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a car dealership. Jimmy let out an uncomfortable laugh, looking at the audience as if they were in on some joke. Okay, you got me. Sometimes the weeks blur together. You know how it is. But I do watch, Mikey. Come on, do you? Mikey pressed because every time someone from the show comes on here, you tell the same stories about when you were on the show. It's always about you, about your time, about how great it was for you. The cameras stayed on both of them, capturing every micro-expression. Jimmy's hand went to his tie, adjusting it nervously. I'm just trying to relate, man. We have that shared experience. We don't have a shared experience, Jimmy. Mikey said, leaning forward now. You were on the show 20 years ago. It's a completely different world now. Different cast, different writers, different audience, different everything. But every interview becomes a trip down your memory lane. Jimmy's face was reening, his trademark composure starting to crack. Whoa. Okay, I didn't realize we were doing this tonight. I thought we were just having fun here. Having fun? Mikey repeated. Is that what this is? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels like you using my time to talk about yourself. The audience was dead silent. Now, some people were looking at each other, unsure if this was part of a bit or if they were witnessing something genuine. The band members sat frozen instruments in hand. Jimmy straightened in his chair, his voice taking on a defensive tone. Mikey, I don't know where this is coming from, but maybe we should take a break or something. No, Mikey said firmly. I think we should keep going. Let's really talk about what Jimmy's voice had lost all its playfulness now. About how you treat guests who aren't A-list celebrities. About how you phone it in when you think someone's not important enough. About how this whole thing Mikey gestured around the studio is just a performance where you don't actually care about the people sitting in this chair. Jimmy stood up abruptly, his cards scattering across the desk. That's not fair, man. That's not fair at all. Mikey stood too, matching his energy. Isn't it? The tension was suffocating. Cameras zoomed in on both their faces, capturing every moment of this unraveling interview. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing something they never expected to see. Jimmy's hands were shaking slightly as he gripped the edge of his desk. You know what, Mikey? If you had a problem with how I conduct interviews, maybe you should have said something before you came on my show. This is my stage. This is my house. Your house. Mikey laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jimmy, this isn't your house. This is a network studio. You're just a guy they hired to fill the seat. And honestly, watching you right now, I'm starting to wonder why they picked you in the first place. The audience gasped. Several people had their phones out now, clearly recording what was happening. Jimmy's face went from red to pale, his jaw clenching. You need to be very careful about what you say next or what Mikey challenged. You'll laugh it off. Make a joke. Do that thing where you slap the desk and pretend everything's funny. That's your move, right? Deflect with humor because you can't handle actual conversation. Jimmy pointed at him, his finger trembling with anger. I have been nothing but nice to you. I invited you here. I promoted your work, and this is how you repay that. By attacking me in front of millions of people. Nice. Mikey scoffed. Jimmy, you didn't even know what sketch I did last week. You called it a restaurant when it was a car dealership. You know why? Because you don't care. You had your assistant pull up one clip. You skimmed it and you moved on. That's not being nice. That's being lazy. I am not lazy. Jimmy shot back, his voice rising. Do you know how hard I work? Do you have any idea what it takes to do this show 5 nights a week? The prep, the rehearsals, the pressure. Then why does it feel so empty? Mikey asked quietly. And somehow that was more cutting than anything he'd said loudly. Why does every interview feel like you're reading from a script? Why can't you just be real with people? Jimmy was breathing hard now, his chest rising and falling visibly. This is real, Mikey. This right here, this is as real as it gets. You came on my show and ambushed me. I didn't ambush you, Mikey said, his voice steady. I answered your questions honestly. You asked me about my favorite sketch, and I told you the truth. You don't actually watch. You don't actually care. And when I pointed that out, you couldn't handle it because it's not true, Jimmy shouted, and the audience flinched at the volume. I do care. I care about every single person who sits in that chair. I care about making people laugh. I care about this show. Then prove it, Mikey said. Tell me one thing about me that's not on those cards. One thing you actually know because you paid attention, not because someone wrote it down for you. Jimmy stared at him, his mouth opening and closing. The silence stretched out, excruciating and revealing. The cameras captured every second of his inability to answer. Finally, he grabbed the cards from his desk, holding them up. These aren't a crutch, Mikey. These are professional. This is how television works. We have producers who research guests who put together information so we can have smooth, entertaining conversations. That's the job. The job, Mikey repeated slowly, is to connect with people, to make them feel seen. To have actual moments, not manufactured ones. But you wouldn't know about that, would you? Because everything about this, he gestured around the studio again, is manufactured. The laugh, the enthusiasm, the interest. None of it's real. Jimmy threw the cards down, and they scattered across the floor. You want real? Fine. Here's real. You're bitter. You're bitter because you've been in comedy for years and you're still playing supporting roles. You're bitter because guys like me got the big breaks and you're still grinding. And instead of being grateful that someone with a platform is trying to help you, you come here and you sabotage yourself. The words hung in the air like poison. Mikey's expression hardened, his jaw setting. There it is. That's what you really think. That anyone who criticizes you must be jealous. That anyone who calls you out must be bitter. It couldn't possibly be that you're actually not as great as you think you are. Get out, Jimmy said suddenly, his voice low and dangerous. What? Get out of my studio. Get off my stage. This interview is over. Jimmy turned to someone off camera. Can we get security in here? Mikey laughed in disbelief. You're kicking me off for what? For being honest. For being disrespectful, Jimmy snapped. For coming into my house and disrespecting me, my show, and everyone who works here. You don't get to do that. Your house again? Mikey said, shaking his head. It's always about you, isn't it? Even now, when you're throwing me out, it's about your feelings, your show, your reputation. Not once have you stopped to think that maybe, just maybe, I have a point. 2 security guards appeared from the wings, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. The audience was in complete shock. Some people standing up to get a better view. Jimmy pointed at Mikey, then at the exit, escort him out. Now, Jimmy, don't do this, Mikey said. But his tone had shifted. There was something almost pleading in it now, like he hadn't expected it to go this far. We can talk about this. We can have an actual conversation. The time for conversation was before you decided to humiliate me on live television, Jimmy said coldly. Now it's time for you to leave. The security guards moved closer, flanking Mikey, but not touching him. One of them spoke quietly. Sir, we need you to come with us. Mikey looked at them, then back at Jimmy, then out at the audience. For a moment, he seemed like he might say something else, might try to salvage the situation. But then his expression closed off, becoming unreadable. Fine, I'll leave. But everyone watching. Everyone here, they saw what just happened. They saw you run away from the truth. They saw a guest disrespect a host, Jimmy countered. That's what they saw. No, Mikey said, starting to walk toward the exit with the guards on either side of him. They saw exactly who you really are. And no amount of smiling and desk slapping is going to change that. He was halfway to the wings when he turned back one more time. You know what the saddest part is, Jimmy? I actually used to respect you. I used to think you were one of the good ones, but you're just like all the rest. More worried about your image than your integrity. Jimmy didn't respond. He stood behind his desk, rigid and furious, watching as Mikey disappeared into the wings with security. The audience was completely silent, the shock of what they'd witnessed, rendering them speechless. Someone coughed nervously. A chair creaked, but no one clapped. No one laughed. No one knew what to do. Jimmy stood there for what felt like an eternity, his chest heaving, his face still flushed with anger and embarrassment. The camera stayed on him, capturing every second of his struggle to regain composure. The studio lights felt hotter somehow, more oppressive. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do next. Finally, he turned to the audience, forcing his signature smile, though it looked strained and unnatural. Well, that was something, right? His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Nobody laughed. The silence was deafening. He tried again, running a hand through his hair. I guess we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with him. He glanced down at his desk where his rundown sheet should have been. But everything was scattered from when he'd thrown the cards. We'll be right back. The stage manager made a cutting motion, and the cameras stopped their live feed, cutting to commercial. But the audience was still there, still watching Jimmy as he slumped against his desk, his hands covering his face. The band members exchanged glances, unsure whether to approach or stay put. Questlove, the band leader, stood up slowly, taking a step toward the desk. Jimmy, he started, his voice gentle. Not now, Jimmy said from behind his hands, his voice muffled and tight. Just not now. In the wings, Mikey was standing with the security guards, both of whom looked deeply uncomfortable with the entire situation. One of them, an older man with gray hair, cleared his throat. Sir, we're going to need you to head to your dressing room to collect your things. Mikey nodded, his own adrenaline starting to fade, replaced by the weight of what had just happened. Yeah, okay. His voice was quieter now, the fire from moments ago reduced to embers. As they walked through the narrow backstage corridors, passing crew members who quickly averted their eyes, Mikey could hear the murmur of confused conversations. Everyone had heard what happened. Everyone was talking about it. His phone was already buzzing in his pocket. Notification after notification coming through. Back on stage, Jimmy had straightened up, his hands now gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles were white. A producer approached him cautiously. a woman in her 30s with a clipboard and a concerned expression. "Jimmy, we need to figure out how to address this when we come back," she said softly. "As what?" Jimmy snapped. "Address the fact that I just got attacked on my own show. That's not how the audience is seeing it," she said carefully. "The footage, the way you reacted, it's not good. We need damage control." Jimmy's eyes flashed with renewed anger. Damage control. He came here and sabotaged the interview. He made everything about himself and his issues with me. "Jimmy," the producer said, her voice firmer now. "He made some points that are resonating with people. Even in this room right now, I can see it on their faces. They don't know who to side with. They should side with me." Jimmy shouted, then caught himself, lowering his voice when he saw crew members staring. "They should side with me. I'm the host. I've been doing this for years. I've earned respect." "Then show them why," she said simply. "When we come back, you need to acknowledge what happened. You need to show grace." Jimmy laughed bitterly. "He gets to humiliate me, and I'm supposed to show grace." "Yes," she said without hesitation, because that's what real hosts do. They stay in control even when everything falls apart. The words hit him harder than Mikey's head. He stared at her, seeing his own failure reflected in her eyes. The commercial break was ending. They had less than a minute. "What do I say?" he asked, and for the first time he sounded lost. "The truth," she said. "Whatever that is for you." The stage manager started counting down. 10 seconds, 98. Jimmy took a deep breath, smoothing down his suit jacket, running his hand through his hair one more time. The audience was still eerily quiet, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. The cameras came back on, the red lights blinking to life. "We're back," Jimmy said, and his voice was different now, softer, less performative. "And I think we need to talk about what just happened here." The audience leaned forward collectively, hanging on every word. That was intense," Jimmy continued, his hands fidgeting with a pen on his desk. "And I know you're all sitting there wondering what you just witnessed. And honestly, so am I." He paused, looking down at the desk, then back up at the camera. "Mikey Day, who was just here, he said some things that were hard to hear, and I reacted in a way that in hindsight maybe wasn't the best way to handle it." His voice caught slightly. "He accused me of not caring, of phoning it in, and that really, really hurt because I do care. I care so much about this show, about making people laugh, about giving guests a platform." The audience remained silent, listening. "But maybe," Jimmy said slowly, each word seeming to cost him something. "Maybe in caring so much about the show, about the format, about keeping everything smooth and entertaining, I've lost sight of what actually matters, which is connection. Real connection." He looked directly at the camera. "Now, I don't know if Mikey was right about everything he said. I don't know if I'm as bad as he made me sound. But I do know that when someone challenges you, when someone holds up a mirror and forces you to look at yourself, the mature thing to do isn't to kick them off your stage. It's to listen. And I didn't listen. I just reacted." Someone in the audience started clapping slowly, and then others joined in. It wasn't thunderous applause, but it was something in acknowledgement. Jimmy held up his hand, stopping them. "No, don't applaud that. I'm not looking for applause. I'm just trying to be honest with you. With myself." He took another shaky breath. "The truth is, doing this show every night, it gets exhausting. And sometimes I do rely on those cards a little too much. Sometimes I do tell the same stories because they're comfortable and I know they'll get a laugh. And sometimes I probably don't dig as deep with guests as I should." The camera stayed tight on his face, capturing the raw vulnerability. "But that doesn't mean I don't care," Jimmy said, his voice stronger now. "It means I'm human. It means I'm trying my best. And sometimes my best isn't enough." And when Mikey called me out on that, instead of acknowledging it, instead of having a real conversation about it, I got defensive. I got angry and I had him removed from the stage. He shook his head slowly. "That was wrong. That was me protecting my ego instead of facing the truth. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Mikey. I'm sorry to all of you watching. And I'm sorry to everyone who works on this show who had to witness that." The silence in the studio was different now. Not uncomfortable, but contemplative. "I don't know what happens from here," Jimmy admitted. "I don't know if Mikey will accept my apology. I don't know if this changes anything about how I do the show, but I do know that tonight was a wake-up call, and I needed it, even if it hurt." He looked around the studio, at the band, at the crew, at the audience. "We're going to end the show here tonight. I don't think any of us are in the right headspace to keep going, but thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing this messy, uncomfortable, very real moment. Because this is what television should be sometimes. Not polished, not perfect, just honest. The cameras held on him for a few more seconds before the stage manager called for them to cut. The audience sat in stunned silence for a moment before slowly beginning to gather their things, talking in hushed, animated voices. Jimmy walked off the stage without looking at anyone, disappearing into the same wings where Mikey had exited minutes before. The producer caught up with him in the hallway. "That was good," she said gently. "That was the right thing to do." Jimmy didn't respond. He just kept walking, his shoulders hunched, looking smaller somehow than he had when the show started. Behind him, the studio was erupting in chaos as crew members scrambled to figure out what to do with the rest of the scheduled programming. As producers fielded phone calls from network executives, as the audience filed out talking excitedly about what they'd just seen. And somewhere in the building, Mikey Day was packing up his belongings, his phone still buzzing relentlessly, facing his own reckoning about what he'd started and where it would lead. So, what do you think? Was Mikey right to call out Jimmy Fallon on live television? Or did he cross the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're going to be following this story as it develops. This is one interview that nobody's going to forget anytime soon.